Good morning, everyone. So we only have a couple lessons left, and like I was explaining in the last episode or in the last video, we are only doing a very small portion of Chapter 9. So what we're doing today is we're going to figure out a way that we can determine how many answers we're going to get before we even solve. Now, I know we had talked about in the previous lesson that we can determine how many answers there are based on the highest degree. Well, yes, that's true, but we also have to worry about solutions that are either the same solution or, and we've talked about these before, we haven't really gone into great detail about them, but there are such things called imaginary numbers. And we could get imaginary number answers for these. So we kind of have to be a little bit careful here. So in order to determine or to figure out how many solutions I can have with any single quadratic function, we get to use what's called the discriminant. Okay? So what the discriminant tells us is, based upon what number I get for the discriminant, that's going to tell me how many solutions I have in my quadratic function. So let's go over what the discriminant is first. So the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. Okay, so this is my discriminant. This is how I determine to find, or this is how I find the discriminant. B squared minus 4ac. Now, this should look familiar to you because if we remember our quadratic formula, this is just the number that's underneath the square root, right? When we go through the song, you have plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. So this is whatever's underneath the radical. That is called the discriminant. So how can I use this to determine the number of answers I have? Well, think about it this way. When you have a square root of a number, okay, if that number is a perfect square, right, or any number really, you usually get two answers. You get a positive and a negative of whatever the square root of that number is. So if I have a plus and a minus, that means that whatever number is out front here, I'm going to first add to this number and then subtract to this number. Meaning I'm going to get two different answers. So that's the first thing. If my discriminant, if b squared minus 4ac is a positive number, any positive number, we are going to have two real solutions. Okay, and remember, we call them real solutions because they are in the realm of real numbers. There are such things as non-real or imaginary numbers. Like I said, we're not really going to get into that, but they exist, so we need to talk about them. We need to make sure that we say that they exist. Okay, so that's the first way. If I get a positive number from b squared minus 4ac, we have two real solutions. Well, what happens if I get a negative number for b squared minus 4ac? Meaning, if I had the square root of a negative number. Well, can you even do that? Can you take the square root of a negative number? Well, the answer is no. You cannot take the square root of a negative number. At least, we don't know any way to. Eventually, you will find a way to take the square root of a negative number, but you'll talk more about that in Algebra 2. So for right now, no. We have no way of taking the square root of a negative number. So if you get a negative number, any negative number, you have zero real solutions. Okay, and again, that goes based on the fact that we can't take the square root of a negative number. We don't know how to. So since we can't do it, we can't do the rest of the quadratic formula. So we have, so far, so far we have two different options. If we get a positive number from b squared minus 4ac, we get two real solutions. If we get a negative number from b squared minus 4ac, we have zero real solutions. Well, the only other thing left, we've talked about all positive numbers, we've talked about all negative numbers. The only number that doesn't fall into positive or negative is if we get 0. If you get 0, when you do b squared minus 4ac, what happens if you get the number 0? Well, again, let's look at it. What is the square root of 0? Square root of 0 is just 0. So you're going to have some number in the quadratic formula plus or minus 0. Well, does it matter if you add or subtract 0? Are you going to get the same answer? Well, hopefully you said yes, right? Any number plus 0, you just get the same number, and any number minus 0, you get the same number. So what that means is that I'm only going to get one answer from this. I'm not going to get two different ones, because when I take this number and add 0, I just get the number. When I take this number and subtract 0, I just get that number. So I'm only going to get one real solution. So three different possibilities here. If b squared minus 4ac is positive, you know you will get two real solutions. If b squared minus 4ac is negative, you will get no real solutions. And if b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0, you will have one real solution. So let's give this a little bit of a try here using the discriminant. Okay, this is definitely going to be a much shorter video than normally, especially since it's Friday or Monday, whenever you're watching this. And like I said, since we're down to kind of the end of the year here, we don't have too many lessons left. We actually only have one lesson left to do, which will span over the next 2 lessons. So it'll be Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday, and then that'll be it. We're almost done. So let's do a problem here with the discriminant. So let's say I had the equation 4x squared plus 5x equals negative 3. And rather than determining the actual solutions, which eventually it'll ask you to find the actual solutions, but first let's just say I wanted to determine how many solutions there are, and I want to know what is the discriminant. Okay? So, just like when we were solving, the first thing I always have to do is rewrite the equation. Rewrite the equation in standard form. Again, if you forget what standard form is, that is ax squared plus bx plus c. And then either it's a 0 over here, a y over here, anything. In this case, we're going to have a 0. There's no y. So I want to write it so that all the numbers are on one side and get a 0 on the other. So what I need to do is I need to take my negative 3 and I need to add 3 to both sides. So I'm going to end up with the equation 4x squared plus 5x plus 3 equals 0. So now, in order to find the discriminant, I have to work with my discriminant formula, which is just b squared minus 4ac. Now again, just like in the quadratic formula, the only things I need to know are a, b, and c. So in this case, 4, that's my a. Positive 5, that's my b. And positive 3, that's my c. So now I'm just going to take these a, b, and c and plug it into my b squared minus 4ac. So I'm going to get 5 squared minus 4 times 4 times 3. And now I'm just going to solve this. 5 squared is 25 minus 4 times 4 is 16. And 16 times 3 is 48. And then 25 minus 48 gives me a negative 23. So the first question here was, what's the discriminant? Well, the discriminant here is negative 23. Well, now the second question says, based on the discriminant, how many real solutions do we have? Well, if we go back to what we were talking about before, if it's a positive number, you get 2 real solutions. If it's a negative number, you have 0 real solutions. If it's 0, you have 1 real solution. Well, this is negative 23. So since it's a negative number, we have 0 real solutions. And this does help as well, because now you don't even have to go through putting this into the quadratic formula, because you already know you're going to end up with no real solutions. So there's no point in putting it through. You're already done. You would say, I have 0 real solutions, there's no real solutions, and that's it. Now, obviously, if you get a positive number here, or 0, you would then, if it asks, solve for the solutions, all you would have to do is take whatever you get for this number and put it under the square root in the quadratic formula, since you already did b squared minus 4ac. You get to just put this under the radical, and then it makes it a little bit easier for you as well. All right, so I've got 2 problems up here. I'd like you to try these on your own. Again, I want you to do 2 things. I want you to first state the value of the discriminant. Then I want you to determine the number of real solutions. So you should be getting 2 answers here. First, what's the value of the discriminant? So some number. And then based on that number, how many real solutions will this quadratic formula, or this quadratic function, have? So pause the video, take 5 minutes, and try this on your own. Okay, so hopefully this is what you got as your answers. For the first one, we don't have to move anything around. It's already in standard form for us. ax squared plus bx plus c, so that's nice. We're working with b squared minus 4ac. A is 2, b is 11, c is 15. We plug everything in, and we solve it. 11 squared is 121. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 15 gives us 120. So it's 121 minus 120, and that gives us 1. So the discriminant for this problem is 1. Now 1, excuse me, is a positive number. Because 1 is a positive number, that means that we have 2 real solutions. All right, so the discriminant would be 1, and we would have 2 real solutions. Off on the other one, again, we don't have to move anything around. It's very nicely done for us. So 9 is A, negative 30 is B, and positive 25 is C. So I plug it all in. I get negative 30 squared minus 4 times 9 times 25. Negative 30 squared is positive 900. Remember, when you square a negative number, it becomes positive. 4 times 9 is 36. 36 times 25 is 900. So 900 minus 900 is 0. So the discriminant is 0. And what did we say? When the discriminant is 0, that means there's only 1 real solution. So this is how we work with our discriminant in order to determine how many real solutions there are. We can then use this to solve for what the actual solutions are. If we wanted to, I would just take this and replug it into the quadratic formula. Okay?